afternoon, and thanks for joining us for the first Society of Breast Imaging Young Professional Section moderated panel discussion. My name is Dr. Katie Davis, and I am an assistant professor and breast imager at Vanderbilt University Medical Center. Over the next few minutes, we will define wellness, work-life balance, and their importance during the early career years. We will also spend time defining physician burnout and best strategies to mitigate burnout for the early career radiologist. I am thrilled to be joined by my esteemed colleagues who I will introduce now. Dr. Cheri Canon is a professor and Witten Stanley Endowed Chair of Radiology at the UAB School of Medicine. She sits on the FAAWR Board of Governors and was the Vice Chair of the American College of Radiology, Chancellor on the ACR Board, and previously served as the Chair of the ACR Commission on Education. She is the President of the Society of Chairs of Academic Radiology Departments, or SCARD, and the co-creator of LEAD, a women's leadership development program jointly developed by SCARD and GE Healthcare. Additionally, she sits on the Board of Directors for the Association of University Radiologists, the Society of Abdominal Radiology, and the Academy of Radiology Research Academic Council. Thank you for being here, Dr. Canon.
Of course.
Dr. Nisha Mehta is a radiologist, keynote speaker, physician, community builder, and physician advocate. Her missions include addressing the physician burnout epidemic through physician empowerment and cultural change in medicine, as well as increasing business and financial literacy among physicians in order to promote career longevity and satisfaction. She has built online communities of over 118,000 verified physician members where these topics are discussed. Her work has been featured in numerous international media outlets, including Forbes, CNN, The Washington Post, Bloomberg, and PBS NewsHour. She was recently named a 2020 Top Voice in Healthcare by LinkedIn. She lives and works in Charlotte, North Carolina, with her husband and 2 sons. Thank you for being here, Dr. Mehta.
Thank you for having me. I'm really honored to be here.
Dr. Seidel is a breast imaging radiologist and associate professor of diagnostic radiology and imaging sciences at Emory University School of Medicine. After graduating from medical school, Dr. Seidel moved to Atlanta to do her residency in diagnostic radiology and fellowship in breast imaging at Emory, where she has remained on faculty. Dr. Seidel is committed to improving radiologists' well-being through her research on ergonomics and service in local and national organizations. She chairs her department's wellness committee, serves on the Emory School of Medicine Wellness Working Group, and the ACR's Wellbeing Committee. In her spare time, she enjoys spending time with her husband and 3 children, exercising and outdoor adventure. Thank you for being here, Dr. Seidel.
Thank you for having me.
And finally, Dr. Reed Omary is a physician leader at Vanderbilt University Medical Center in Nashville, Tennessee. He has more than 20 years of experience as a practicing interventional radiologist, scientist, and educator. Reed is an avid mentor who enjoys inspiring individuals and organizations alike to innovate. Thank you for being here, Dr. Omary.
Thank you.
So without further ado, let's just jump in. I would like for all of you to consider the following scenario. Upon fellowship graduation, a breast imager accepts their first job. It's in a new city far from home. They don't know any of their colleagues. They have no connections in the city. They have a growing family with 3 kids under the age of 6. 9 months into their first job, COVID hits, bringing a new level of daily uncertainty. As this person's mentor, how do you introduce the concept of wellness and emphasize its importance in the early career setting? And let's start with Dr. Seidel on this one.
It's a great question. I've been there, so I empathize with this person. I think one way to look at wellness that is simple is to think about the 8 dimensions of wellness. That includes intellectual, emotional, physical, social, occupational, financial, environmental, and spiritual well-being. Again, Google dimensions of wellness, and there are lots of nice diagrams showing that. And I think for this person, a good thing to do would be think about those dimensions and what do they think, which of those, pick 1 or 2, that most impact their well-being, that are most important to them. So for me, physical well-being is so important, exercise is so important. So that would be my number 1, but it's different for everybody. And then to think about 1 or 2 goals for their most important aspects of their well-being that they can work toward over 6 to 12 months. So if it's exercise, a goal could be to regularly exercise 3 times a week. If the social dimension of wellness is very important to them, they can try to have lunch with friends 2 times a month. These kinds of small attainable goals, focusing on the areas that they feel are most important to their well-being.
Thank you for that response. Anyone else like to chime in?
I think the one thing that I would add to that, and those are all really great points, I think the one thing that I would really emphasize to everyone who's a young physician is just the importance of being kind to yourself. I think that is just, I mean, it sounds really trite, but the thing is we're just trained to be soldiers throughout our training, right? We can handle anything, we can do anything, and we don't ask people for help, we don't outsource. And if I had to go back and do those early attending years over again, I would have listened to everybody who told me to get some help, outsource what it was that I didn't need to be doing, to understand that taking care of myself actually is really important for me to be able to provide good patient care and to do everything that I want to do for my family. And I think as a young attending, you're coming out, I had 2 young children. My husband was a surgical fellow at Duke. We were just so busy doing all the things. And I kind of viewed it as my role to just handle everything and never really thought about outsourcing anything. And I think when you put all that pressure on yourself, and you don't take time to take care of yourself in the long run, that can really lead to expedited burnout really quickly, right? So we know the stats for early career women in medicine, right? We know 40% of female physicians will actually cut back clinically or leave medicine entirely within their first 5 years of practice. And a lot of that is really due to us feeling as though our professional and personal lives can't really line up. So really making sure that you do take care of yourself, understanding that the long-term goal is career longevity, and that if you burn out early and quickly, you're never going to be able to do all the things that you want to be able to do for your family, for your patients, et cetera. So really prioritizing that self-care.
Yeah, I heard this great analogy when I was on my Peloton last week, and it was, she was saying, when your device is like at 10% and it's blinking red, you rush to charge your device. And we should take wellness and self-care in the same mindset. If we're not feeling like we're energized or ready for the day, we need to take care of ourselves before we can help our patients. And so I thought that was a really cool concept. All right, well, moving right along. So some of my this question is for Drs. Omary and Canon. Some of my young professional colleagues may feel this fear of missing out, or FOMO, on work-related opportunities. Like, when should we get involved with speaking engagements, professional organizations? I have often heard the phrase, try to say yes as much as possible in your early career. And, I want to really know your thoughts on this and how we balance work life in the first 5 to 10 years of practice.
Dr. Canon, you want to lead off with that?
Okay. My answer to this has really changed. I remember 15 years ago when asked this question. In fact, I can look back at presentations and it's in there. Say yes to everything in the first 5 years. And I now say yes, give an informed yes, and with caveats. And it really, to mitigate burnout, it's really about control and passion. And burnout is not about working hard. We all work hard. Physicians by definition are hard workers for the most part. But it's really not having that control over your life, or not being engaged and passionate. So I look at opportunities as they come along. Is it something you love? Take stock of your existing activities. And I think this is where a mentor is really helpful, because you can bounce some ideas off of them. With their experience, they can guide you through the politics of what saying yes or no to certain opportunities may lead to, and particularly the unintended consequences that you perhaps have no concept of yet. So I do think it's important to say yes often, because sometimes you may not know what you're passionate about, particularly early in your career. And so many people enter into their early faculty positions. Oh, I'm not that interested in research. Well, perhaps you are or not. Have you been exposed to it in a certain way? So I would say a qualified yes, but have a mentor there to help guide you on what's truly important and help you with that long game.
Yeah, and I completely agree with Dr. Canon. I'd add also that the more we can look inside to understand who we want to be and where we want to go, the easier it is to determine whether the yes is going to advance that, or if the yes is really going to be a distraction. I'll also say for early career faculty, let's get like really tangible. Unless there are really compelling reasons, say no to the offer to write book chapters. Book chapters are the single greatest source of frustration. They will not advance your career. Say no. And so many well-intentioned people will pawn off their book chapters on early career faculty. That was advice I was given. Apparently there was a Nobel Prize winning economist from the University of Chicago who said what was their secret, and said, don't write the book chapter.
Amen. And it's hard to say no to that because it seems like something really cool, right? That falls in your lap. Oh, I could tell you horror stories. Just say no.
Thank you both for that. I want to specifically talk right now about wellness and breast imagers. And this question is for Dr. Seidel and Dr. Mehta. So both of you as breast imagers understand that we have intermittent tendencies to be sedentary with our work, but then we also balance the stress of a very busy clinical day, seeing diagnostic patients every 15 minutes all day, for example. Despite knowing these risks, we're still not very good during the workday practicing wellness. So what are some tangible suggestions that we can adopt during our workday to be better?
I guess I could start with that. For me, it's really been some very concrete changes. I think really bringing a bottle of water and making sure that I get through that entire bottle of water all day, and also making sure that I take time to eat lunch. I feel like on those busy days, sometimes I would just get to the end of the day and I'd be so exhausted and I'd have this headache. And part of it was just that I was dehydrated and I hadn't eaten. And so really just being conscientious about the fact that, yes, there's always something to do, but just take that 2 or 3 minute break and do that. And then for the long screening days, I am such a big advocate of the standing workstation. And, if you have the ability to do something like that, I know as we get older, that your back pain will be legit if you sit in that chair all day and your neck is just straight looking at those screeners, and it's ergonomically. And I know this is Dr. Seidel's area of expertise, so I'll let her get into that. But I think I'm a big fan of the standing workstation on days where you're going to be sitting and going through a pile of screeners.
Agree 100%. That is my number one thing about taking care of yourself at work, is to learn about ergonomics, so you know how to appropriately adjust your chair and sit in it and use your accessories, and really advocate for appropriate equipment that you can adjust to optimize ergonomics. That I think is a challenge in a lot of practices. So it's really important that all of your equipment, accessories, desk, chair, everything you use supports optimizing ergonomics. And Elizabeth Krupinski, a colleague of mine at Emory, and I wrote an article, Optimizing Ergonomics in Breast Imaging. It's in JBI from 2019, and it very much outlines everything you need to know to work safely and efficiently. So check that out. And also I echo Nisha, it's so important to take breaks when there's so much work to do. And I fall into this as well. It's so hard to stop because you're doing it. And something I find helpful is to sometimes just even set reminders on your phone, set alarms, because you need to change position, physically get up and move around, even get some fresh air if that's possible, eat. And also your eyes you need to take a visual break, or you easily get symptoms of eye strain and fatigue. And these things all actually lead to error. And especially when you're young, early in your career, you're even harder on yourself when you make an error. So it's important that you really pay attention to taking care of yourself during the workday to perform your best.
Yes, thank you. And now I would like to sort of discuss the fallout of not practicing wellness, which would be burnout. And so my first question is going to go to Dr. Canon. For those of us who may not have heard your recent RSNA discussion regarding burnout, can you describe the surprising or yellow light signs of burnout? And from a chair's perspective, how might you identify an early career faculty at risk?
So really important question. And you know, we think of the stereotypical appearance of someone who is burned out. And the challenge is once it's to that point, in some respects, it may be too late. And because the depersonalization component of burnout, they become in deep denial. And it's really hard to rescue someone at that point. So you really want to back up the timeline and look for, in some cases, really subtle things. And I think the key point is a change in behavior. And so someone is more reserved, even if they're normally quiet individuals or introverted, they become even more reserved. Or perhaps individuals become just slightly disruptive. Perhaps they have some sarcastic humor, but it becomes more biting. And even really high functioning leaders become, they're intolerant. They can't problem solve in the usual ways. They fly off the handle. I kind of refer to it, you know, they coming into my office with their hair on fire about relatively solvable problems. All of those things to me warrant the private conversation. Okay, what's going on? This is not behavior that I usually see in you. What's happening? And give them the benefit of the doubt that this is a product of burnout and not just their being a difficult, disruptive physician, and giving them the opportunity to come clean with that. And so as leaders, I think we need to actively step in that situation. And you're never going to be called out for calling someone out too early. And it should be a private conversation and intervening. And they may say, no, it's just a bad day. Things are fine. Okay, we'll let it go. But if it continues, then you're really going to have to increase your engagement and try to redirect and really sit down and problem solve. Why are they in this situation? Why are they not in control? And how can we get them back to their passions? And then the other piece for a leader is our role on the system level problem, because we can talk about burnout all day long and the individual components of it, which are very important. But at the end of the day, it's those system level changes, operations, policy processes that truly impact individuals. And so we have to advocate for our physicians and so to help mitigate against those system changes.
Thank you, Dr. Canon. The next question is for Dr. Mehta or Seidel. So you had touched on this earlier. A 2020 Medscape survey found 46% of radiologists admitting to burnout. Specifically, a separate poll geared towards breast radiologists found that 78% of those radiologists are feeling burnout. Can you elaborate on why breast imagers specifically have this higher rate of burnout, or what we may be susceptible to?
I went first last time. Rebecca, do you want me to go first, or do you? I guess I'll just chime in and say, you know, it's interesting. I think the reason has a lot to do with demographics and who a lot of breast imagers tend to be. I think obviously there's a disproportionate number of females, and there's a disproportionate number probably of earlier career physicians within that pool. And so it's interesting because if you look at burnout rates in different demographics, a lot of people will say, oh, you know, like burnout is a female problem. And it's funny because it's actually not. If you look at burnout rates amongst physicians after their first decade of practice, female and male burnout rates are actually very similar. But in that first decade of practice, female physicians will report much higher rates of burnout across the board, whether they're breast imagers or not. And I think a lot of that has to do with just how many balls you're juggling at that stage in your life, right? You've come out, you've got young children, maybe you are in an early stage of a marriage, you're also early stage trying to prove yourself in your career. There's just a whole lot of things going on in that particular demographic. And on top of that, I think there's an emotional component to what we do as radiologists that are specializing in breast imaging that I think can really factor into a lot of the emotional fatigue that goes into seeing patients with breast cancer, having a face to the name, having that personal element with our patients, particularly when you look at who breast cancer patients tend to be and how we tend to get to know their stories. I think you get to a point where that compassion fatigue can also roll in. So a lot of different factors playing in.
Yeah, I'm not sure I have too much to add to that. I echo everything you say. And compared to some other diagnostic radiologists, breast imagers have the pressure often of having that patient right there, you know, having to give the bad news in person, having to make the decision, you know, do I need to biopsy this or not? Having to have those difficult conversations on top of doing all the other work that, you know, just interpreting the images. And it's a difficult job, and you're looking for a needle in the haystack. It's a tough thing, and it's very hard. The more you do it, the better you get at it. So when you're early in your career, you just don't have that experience and confidence to draw on. And it's pressure. But regarding burnout, the one good thing is that the research has showed that, you know, if you spend only 20% of your time doing what you are most passionate about, what really feeds your soul and brings you joy and gives you fulfillment, that is a good good protection against burning out. So I encourage young faculty, all of us, to, you know, do some soul searching and find what gives us the most joy of practice. What do we find most fulfilling professionally? And then how can we work toward spending at least a small portion, a day a week or 20% of our time doing that?
Yeah, and actually just to feed on what Rebecca said, you just reminded me also, I think the litigative aspect and the malpractice liability sort of situation from a systemic standpoint can also be a lot of pressure and contribute to burnout, right? I mean, I think just knowing how much more litigative our field is in particular, and, you know, knowing people who have gotten sued and if you have gotten sued, having that hanging over your head also, again, contributors to burnout.
All right, we have 1 minute left, and I would like to hear everyone highlight what they feel are key strategies to mitigating burnout. So top 2, throw them out there.
Exercise.
Take stock of your life. You know, approach it like a problem. Really sit down with pen and paper. Where are you spending your time? Where do you love spending your time? In areas that you don't love, if there's not a reason behind them, offload.
I agree with that. I would add to that just knowing what your deal breakers are, knowing what the things that really take away from your joy are, and trying to find a way to reduce those as much as possible and focus on the things that matter the most. I mean, so many of us just don't have a good, you know, it's funny, I work with a lot of really like burned out physicians at the end. And when you ask them what they want, it's been a long time since anybody's asked them what they wanted and focused on that. So really just ask yourself what it is that you want, what you're trying to build, and then find a way to get there.
And I'd say to get into the habit of expressing gratitude. So like a gratitude journal at night can just be super quick, 1 minute. I think that gives the positive energy to try and overcome a lot of the challenges that we face.
Well, thank you so much, everyone. We have run out of time. I was so honored to be part of this discussion on behalf of all early career breast radiologists. Thank you very much. We appreciate your insights on these topics, and I hope you all have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Dr. Davis.